i en gruppe.
Ok.
For jeg jobber i en arbeid- og inkluderingsbedrift, så jeg hjelper folk ut i arbeid. Og det er jo mange som har sosiale angst eller problemer med å snakke med flere mennesker og sånt. Så det blir jo litt av det hun snakket om i sted her.
Ok, det det hun skal prate om nå?
Nei, det var det hun snakket om i sted, litt av den forskningen sin. Ja. Men ellers så, vi har satt opp en VR-lab nå, så vi skal ta det i bruk nå, så jeg driver og har brukt nesten et år på å finne ut av hva VR er, og hva vi kan bruke det til, og hva vi skal bruke det av forskjellige ting, da, så vi skal ha, for de jobber jo også med, nei, hvordan var det der? Jo, intervju, tror jeg. Jeg tror de jobber med sånn intervju-app. Og så tenkte vi også bruke i forhold til jobbsimulator, at du kan... Så jeg har vært i kontakt med NTNU i Trondheim, sånn universitetet i Trondheim, som har laget noen moduler.
Jeg forsvann litt, ja.
Ja.
Men hva er spennende?
Ja, det er veldig spennende. Ja, det, men hva tenker du skal bruke det til i skolen?
Jag skulle inte säga att jag jobbar, alltså mitt huvudarbete, alltså jag jobbar ju med IT i skolan, men än så länge har vi inte använt VR så mycket.
Nej.
Men jag tänker att man kan använda det till personer, alltså vi satsar ganska mycket på personer med funktionsvariation och liksom diagnoser, och där kan man ju använda VR för de som har koncentrationssvårigheter eller eller träna social träning som du säger där.
Ja. Men är det någon skolor i Sverige som brukar det?
Ja.
I forhold til matematikk og sånne ting, ja.
Ja, det finns det.
Ja, fordi at... For det er det også i Norge. Ja. For i Norge så er det flere skoler som bruker det.
Vad spännande. Alltså jag tror inte, det är inte så stort i Sverige inom skolan, men det kommer mer och mer.
Ja, nej, det er ikke stort i Norge heller.
Nej. Men det finns några skolor.
Ja, det er et stort VR-miljø litt nord for Oslo, Hamar. Og der er det sånn cluster med mange bedrifter som driver med VR og utvikler forskjellige ting, mye innenfor teknologi og trening og sånt. Men
det er vel kanskje mer gymnasium og universitet? Det er som
ja. Men de bruker det på barneskole faktisk, i Østfold, grensa til Sverige.
Ok.
Og
Østfold?
Østfold, ja, da har du skoler som er i Fredrikstad, altså...
Ok. Fredrikstad, ja.
Det er sånn. Og så var jeg i Sandefjord her, og da brukte de det på noen skoler i Sandefjord, innenfor forskjellige fag. Så det er blitt mer av det. Jeg tenker jo også at vi kan bruke det i forhold til fysisk aktivitet, faktisk. På noen av disse her appene du kan kjøpe, noen sånn boks VR. Er jo... Da får du svette ordentlig, faktisk.
Ja, verkligen. Alltså, jag har klättrat och dansat och gjort allt möjligt.
Beat Saber?
Beat Saber, ja.
Ja, men har du prøvd boks VR?
Har
du prøvd boks VR?
Boks VR?
Ja, BOX. Nei, fordi du har en gratis versjon, eller gratis, jeg husker ikke hva den heter for noe, men jeg kjøpte den boks VR, og den er ikke, det ser ikke ut som en person, det kommer bare minne litt om Beat Saber. Og da skal du bokse, ikke sant? Og bøye deg ned og ut til siden og litt sånne ting. Så jeg hadde jo puls opp i 150-160.
det som Beat Saber man ska slå boxar? Eller?
We'll wait till
Ja, Beat Saber, ja, det blir litt lignende Beat Saber, men faktisk enda mer du får til mer kraft, fordi du slår Beat Saber, da bare er det sånn, liksom. Mens Beat Saber så skal du slå mot noen kuler som kommer mot deg på forskjellige måter. Og sånn, og så skal du bøye deg ned og unngå svære klosser som kommer mot deg. Og da kan du ha seanser på 7 minutter, eller 10, eller 30 minutter, eller 59 minutter. Og da legger du inn personaliene dine med alder og vekt. Og så får du se hvor mye kilokalorier du forbruker, ikke sant? Og du setter opp sånne mål for dagen, hvor mye du skal trene. Så den burde du faktisk prøve, altså, ja, den er veldig fin. De klatregreiene har jeg ikke fått til. Jeg kommer ikke så langt. Og så er det jo en del andre sånne, hva skal jeg si, spill som også er morsomme, da.
Ja, jeg så något spel nu, jeg kommer til hva det hette.
Okay, guys, so just whilst we're getting ready here, I'd just like to explain the format. So in a few moments, I'm going to mute the audience, okay? But Evelien has asked that the raise hand for the questions is activated from the start. So if you have any specific questions during the presentation, you can click on the raise hand button. So you should be able to see that now. I'm turning that on now. So you should see the raise hand button now down at your right hand side. So if at any point during the presentation you have a burning question, then Evelien has said that she will try to answer those during the presentation. Yes. So just press that button and she'll keep an eye out. So I'm now going to mute you all so that we have a nice quiet audience. I'm sure you'll behave anyway.
And I want to add to that, by the way, Keith. I'm used to giving very interactive presentations, but it's let me know that you want to say something.
Perfect. So I think we're all good with that. So, okay, it leaves me just to say then to welcome our speaker, who is Evelien Ydo. She's from the Netherlands. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology, and she's mainly specialized in human factors, learning psychology and conversational skills. And her dissertation was on the social regulation of teams in a working environment. And currently, Evelien is studying her master's in educational science and technology, and she's looking at research of assessment in VR. And she's found so far that this topic is quite scarce, and she's going to be telling you all about the challenges and the exciting opportunities that has existed and what she's found so far. So I'm going to hand over now to our speaker, Evelien. It's all yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Keith. Hey, what a nice audience. There are a lot of people. Thank you so much for taking the time to come to my presentation. And I really hope you will learn something new about assessments of learning activities in VR. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so I already had a great introduction, so I won't tell much more about myself anymore, but maybe it's nice to add that I'm indeed doing research about assessments in EPR, of course, but I'm doing this also for a company called Serious VR, and this company designs VR instructions, also training for vocational education, and mainly in the technical sector, so it's pretty cool. And currently I'm doing the research at their company to research how we can assess these VR trainings. I also have some experience in doing research about training presentation skills in VR and how you can provide users with feedback during this training. So that's my experience with VR, and I hope to inform you a little bit more about my research about assessments. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm really curious, and we will now try the raise hand button out. How many of you have experience with assessment? Please give me some emotions if you are assessing students or employees or anything in between. There are a couple of you. Oh no, there are a lot of you who assess. Great. Okay, very cool. Nice, nice. So for the ones who don't know what assessment is, I've put the definition on the slide behind me. And mainly it's about gathering data and gathering information about what a student or trainee has been learning, and not as much about making them learn something. So it's really about the gathering data. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about different assessment methods and how you can choose an assessment method which is most suitable for you. Assessment in VR, obviously, we're going to talk about assessment in VR a lot, and a bit about simulation-based assessment. Finally, I'll tell you a bit about the design of my research, and there will be plenty of room for questions. Yes, next slide. So assessment methods are mainly strategies, techniques, tools, or instruments for collecting information to determine to what extent students demonstrate desired learning outcomes. And I'm really curious if you guys can give me some assessment methods. So use your raise hand button, and I will, or Keith will put you on megaphone to tell me assessment methods. And if you have no clue, think about your high school time or your university time, how you were assessed. Please click the raise hand button in the bottom right for me. Yes. Can you help me manage that, Keith?
Okay, Heather, you should have a megaphone, Heather. You should be able to speak out.
Can you hear me?
Cool. Yeah, give me an assessment method, Heather.
Great.
Go ahead.
Well, multiple choice questions. Ugh.
Yes. Oh, yeah, very good. Definitely, it's used a lot. I've done a lot of multiple choice questions. Nice, thank you.
Thanks for that one. I raised my hand as well, Evelyn. So I was going to say summative assessment in exams. We all know those exams at the end of the year.
Yes.
Yeah, we love the exams. Anybody else? Let's see. Any more methods? We've had Heather. We've had myself. Anybody else going to raise their hand? Come on, let's practice clicking on that raise hand.
Yeah, let's make it a little bit more interactive.
Yeah, we've got a couple coming up here. Let's have a look.
Cool.
We've got Raven.
Nice.
Raven, you've got the megaphone. Raven.
I went to art school, so I was often assessed on the artworks I made, which was often very arbitrary.
How did that work? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
It really depended on the professor or the teacher. Mm-hmm. So it ran the gamut from like, yeah, that's good, it's an A, to like very didactic rubrics that were various shades of helpful or not.
Using rubrics for art, that's an interesting one. I love that. Let's keep in mind that it's really the assessor has a really big effect on what your score will be for an assessment. That's a good thing. I will come back to that later. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Bill, you should have a megaphone now. We should be able to hear you, Bill. Yeah.
Yes. Can you all hear me?
That's right. Yeah, we hear
Definitely.
you.
Great. Okay. So I'm a veteran teacher, over 30 years experience, high school, college level. I'm also run the computer club. I've done tons of multiple choice testing. I'm not a fan of high stakes standardized testing. I think that just needs to be banished from the educational landscape. I'm a huge fan of formative testing to get a quick shot of what my students know. I love having students create. The problem is I have over 2,200 students at my school. And in my computer club, I'm lucky if I get 520 that really have any interest in creativity. And I'm talking about Unity, 3D, 3ds Max, and so on, sort of the power tools of the 21st century. And I don't know how we're going to get kids fired up about creating. That's where the true assessment should be, in creative areas. But a lot of them just are, they're stuck. They're just going through school. So, by the way, thank you very much for embedding questions. Every time I give a lecture, I always encourage that throughout the lecture. And this is one of the few I've been into where that happens. So
of course, yeah, interaction is very important. Yeah, and I can imagine it's really hard to assess creativity in a summative way. It's formative is way more suitable for that. Thank you so much. Okay.
I think we've got one more, actually, Evelyn.
Okay, let's do one more.
So we've got one more in there. It's Victoria. You should have the microphone now. If you try your microphone, Victoria.
Yeah, I do. I cannot not mention peer assessment, of course, because we can assess our peers, our students, colleagues, and so on.
Definitely, yes. Thank you. Great addition.
Super. And this is almost a form of assessment as well, isn't it, Evelyn? Asking the interaction. So yeah, it's a great opportunity.
Very good, Keith. Okay, so Keith on mutual, and there will still be plenty of options to raise your hand if you have a question. So you have given me some great examples of assessment methods. And I want to add some to the list. For example, a certification exam. So an exam that you do to prove that you are capable of doing something. And usually this is been done if you have to prove that you can safely handle certain procedures. Or what do you think about my dissertation? That's also an assessment, right? They will assess me on my research. What is also very important to mention is performance-based assessment, and I don't think I've heard that one yet. And usually this has been done by observations. So students will, for example, show that he or she can master a certain procedure, and an assessor is physically there to assess this person. And it's done in real life. But we also have simulation-based assessment, and this can be done through a simulation on a computer or even in VR. And that's something we will dive more deeper in this presentation. So the main reason and function of assessment is to provide a balanced picture of the user's strengths and weaknesses. That's what you really want to know from your assessment. And each of these methods we have mentioned all have their own list of advantages or disadvantages. So that's good to keep in mind. And the decision to use one method over another method is dependent on quite some factors, including, for example, cost, speed, or the importance of your assessment. These things you need to take into account. So can you please go to the next slides? Thanks. I will grab some water because my throat is getting dry. Thanks. Okay. How to choose an assessment method. These 3 questions on the presentation are very important to ask yourself if you are designing or choosing an assessment method. I highly recommend reading the article by Slania Murphy if you're interested in this, because I think it's a golden article considering assessment, and especially assessments with multimedia. So I will provide the slides for you with the sources if you're interested in that on the Educators Discord. So the first thing is, why are we assessing? Knowing why we assess gives us clarity on what to look for when we are designing an assessment. And I can name a great example for this, because, for example, if you are going to a GP or a doctor, and this doctor is self-proclaimed, but doesn't have any certificates or any proof that he can practice, even though he is very good at his job, it's a bit tricky to go there. A lot of people don't feel comfortable for that, to do that. So proof beyond the skill learned is often an essential necessity in this case. And this proof is often acquired by some form of assessment. So that's in general why we assess. Some other reasons why we assess will be to provide feedback to students on their learning, enable them to improve their performance, for example, or to motivate students to undertake appropriate work. And we can also use assessment to support and guide learning, or to describe student attainment. There are a lot of reasons why you can use assessment, as you can see. But assessment is also used to check if appropriate standards are being maintained. But most importantly, and what you will all recognize, is that usually assessment is used to determine that the intended learning outcomes of, for example, a course of a training are being achieved. So you want to check if your students learned what you intended them to learn. And you can also evaluate your own teaching or the effectiveness of your teaching through assessment. So these two reasons, the last two reasons, are the most used reasons to assess. But you have to decide that for yourself when you are designing an assessment or choosing an assessment method. Nice. So far, no questions, so we will go on. Next up, who is the assessor? The first thing that will come to mind is probably a teacher. But like Victoria already said, it can also be a peer, or you can self-assess. For example, I'm being filmed right now. I could watch this presentation back and assess myself if I think I have some improvement points, which I will certainly do. There's also a possibility of AI or algorithms being the assessor, as we can say that when we are using computers or virtual reality. So there's more to it than you would think, I guess. And lastly, you have the question, what should we measure? A very important question, and it's very linked to the why we do assess. Usually, we want to measure data linked to the learning goals. So we want to measure if students have reached these goals. So to know what to record, you need to know and understand all the different variables that can be used to differentiate one over another, towards the aim of the assessment, of course. So, for example, if you have a speed critical task, speed is the variable that you need to record. And you can record the overall speed of a task. So if a user needs to do a whole procedure, you can just count up all the time and give out the end time. But you could also give time taken at each section of a task, for example. And this should pinpoint you to where the student is having problems more easily, I guess. So, also think about what complex knowledge, skills, or attitudes should be assessed. What behaviors or performances should reveal those constructs, and what task or situation should elicit those behaviors. These are a lot of questions you have to ask yourself when you're designing or choosing an assessment method. So you can already see that it's quite a difficult topic. Yeah, it's really hard. Yep, I know. And there's a lot to be researched about it. Well, an assessment can serve multiple purposes. It's often not possible for one assessment to meet all purposes. So you could consider giving multiple assessments with different methods to gain a better view of the performance of your students or employees. Lastly, validity is the most central concept in assessments, and validity means that you measure what you intend to measure. So if you intend to measure speed, you should check if your data really measures speed. It sounds really simple, but it's the biggest challenge in assessments. Try to prove what you measure is really what you intended to measure. And that's really something we should keep in mind. Next slide, please. Yes. So now we're going to assessment in VR. And the main question I've been asking myself is, how can VR add something new to assessments? Because we can, nowadays, the cost and production of VR assessment is dropping. VR is more familiar to most people, and it becomes more accessible. So it's definitely a thing for the future. And I now want to cite a very nice quote to you, a quote from Thornburg. And he says, the key idea to keep in mind is that the true power of educational technology comes not from replicating things that can be done in different ways, but when it's used to do things that couldn't be done without it. And this is really something I love. I really love this statement, and I always keep it in mind. I even have it copied on my notes on my laptop screen, because it's something we keep forgetting. Usually people use existing traditional assessment methods and try to put them in VR, for example. For example, if you would use a multiple choice method, why would you put a multiple choice method that you can do with pen and paper in VR? It's way cheaper to just print and give everybody a pencil than to develop a whole assessment in VR, right? So that makes no sense. So we should not do that. We should think farther than that, I believe. So this primary information, direct answers to questions, multiple choice questions, these things do not fully utilize all the benefits of VR assessment. But this information is usually used to assess traditionally. That's something to keep in mind. So in brief, you have to also take into account that creating an assessment in VR takes more time. It costs more and it's harder to develop than the traditional assessment method. So it should really add something, I think, yeah. Also, so what assessment types are suited for VR? The National Assessment Governing Board has done some suggestions for us. Yay! And they said it's great to use VR assessments to assess something that cannot be easily observed in real time. For example, we can use some data out of VR assessment that it's really hard to observe when the assessor is physically there. But the main thing is assessing dangerous situations in VR. There lies the power of VR. I mean, it's really good to put people into stressful situations and try to see how they react, but we don't want to put them in real danger, right? So it's better to do that in VR or in a simulation than to really put them into these dangerous situations. What's really nice, by the way, is that VR assessment is more enjoyable to the user. It's usually more representative, and there are a lot of data analysis opportunities. And this is really interesting for companies, of course. You can probably imagine that everything I'm doing right now, the moving around, moving my head, and where I'm looking, all these things can be measured in VR. And they can all be used to assess. Of course, we have to think about if they are important to assess, but they can all be measured. People sometimes ask me, okay, what kind of data can we measure in VR? But you should ask me, how can we use this data to assess? That's the more important question, because we can really measure a lot. Yeah. Okay, I would like the next slide now.
Evelyn, there's a question from Victoria. Would you like to take it now? Or?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Dutch.
Yeah. Victoria, you should have the megaphone now.
Yeah, I have two questions actually. The first one was about examples. You mentioned that we have to measure in VR what we can't measure without VR, and I would like you to give us some examples. Maybe you know something.
Yeah, there are a lot of things. Obviously, we can maybe take an example. Go back to a situation that is hazardous, so a dangerous situation. Mm-hmm. In real life, it will be way more difficult to measure certain things. For example, stress levels. We can now measure heart rate, for example, or focus, so we can check where the user is looking, what they are paying attention to, if they are paying attention at all. And it's really, really difficult to measure in real life, especially in a situation that is stressful. I mean, try and checking and running behind a person who is doing something stressful to assess them, it's quite difficult. So that will be an example, but there are a lot of different examples.
So basically, if I understood you correctly, we can not use new tools of assessment in VR, but we can use assessment in different situations, because VR can be used for riskful situation, or the situation that you cannot create in real life, that we cannot, understand, like for example some physics, and assessment can be used for this situation, but it's not the new tool for assessment. Do I understand you correctly?
Can you repeat the sentence again? You broke up
So
a bit.
basically, it's not about new tools of assessment, but it's about assessment in new situations. Oh, okay, now I see.
Well, VR could be a new tool for assessment, obviously. Yeah, but it's mainly about when to use it and how.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, now I understand.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Evelyn, we also have a question from Bill. Would you like to take that question now?
Okay, one question, yes.
Okay, Bill, so you should have a microphone now.
Yes, okay, I can't wait to jump into this. The way we assess students is so out of line. We herd kids into a room, we put them in little cubicles, and we tell them, all right, let's see how much you've memorized. That is not 21st century education. Exactly the opposite is what we should be doing. We need to get kids in a computer lab and tell them, you guys need to work together. I'm developing some software. I'd love to talk to you. I'm trying to find your email, by the way. Haven't done it, but I'd love to talk to you later. What I'm doing is coming up with RPCs where the kids go in, and I'll give you a great example. I'm doing a virtual field trip. It could be on Mars, where we can't get to yet. Or wait, I want to take them out to Colorado, Wyoming, where it's too expensive. And I'll tell them, okay, you guys got to find 20 fossils, and you've got 30 minutes to do it. And each kid, I don't know how familiar you are with Unity, they go in, all right, and if they start triggering trigger enter events, they have to stay with the fossil like they're preparing it. And they're assessed on how quickly they understand fossils, how well they know the geology, maybe how well they know the structure, and the faster they can do it, that's a great assessment, and how well they work together. Let's get rid of this nonsense of herding kids in little cubicles. We're not preparing them for the 21st century when we do that.
Yes, I agree. I would love to talk more with you after this presentation for sure.
That's a great point, Bill. Well done. Okay,
Yeah,
let's
thank
move
you.
on to the next slide, Evelyn.
Yeah, let's go.
There you go.
So now we're going to talk a bit about simulation-based assessment, and I think, Bill, you would like this topic because it's not at all about the paper and pencil-based tests. Can you please mute yourself? Thank you. Awesome. So it's not about paper and pencil-based tests, like I said, but more about really doing a procedure, for example, or really being busy and doing it instead of only replicating knowledge. So let's talk a bit more about that, because simulation-based assessment is a really great way to assess, and you can easily do it in VR also. So performance-based assessment, we already talked a bit about that. I already told you that it's usually someone performing a certain behavior, for example, a procedure. That's the easiest example, and the assessor looking how he did and assessing that. And simulation-based assessment was literally a simulation. I think everybody knows what that means. On a computer or in VR, where a person just individually does a certain procedure or something like that. So let's see what are the advantages or disadvantages of these two. Both are more fun and entertaining than a paper-based test, that's for sure. We have proven that, yes. And both can induce flow. And flow is just a great state you can be in, where time goes quickly, where you feel at ease and you feel efficient. So that's great. Also, with simulation-based assessments, students feel more motivated and experience less test anxiety. This is probably because they are busy individually and there is nobody looking over their shoulder what they are doing, for example. This has been proven by Shoot. It's a great research also, I can link it to you later. Also, the simulation-based assessments put more emphasis on the application of knowledge rather than replication of knowledge, just like Bill said actually. So I really like that. It's not just about replicating it. Also, these simulation-based assessments, like we talked about, have the possibility to capture data, all different kinds of data, which is quite interesting to look at then. Also, in simulation-based assessments, we can put some embedded assessments in. And embedded assessments are basically also called stealth assessments, maybe that makes more sense. And these assessments are so seamlessly woven into the fabric of the learning environment that they are virtually invisible. So this also helps with the stress level students experience. If they don't know, or they know they are assessed, but they don't notice it, they will definitely feel less stressed. So that's great, right? I really hate test anxiety, so for me that will be great. But of course, there are also some challenges with this. When doing a simulation-based assessment, you can get easily distracted by constructed irrelevant aspects. It sounds very difficult, but basically, if you are doing a simulation in VR for the first time, or you're not really used to VR, you can get distracted by how to use the controllers, or just the whole VR experience. I mean, we all know how we felt when we first put on these goggles, right? It was a bit crazy. I felt a bit like a kid, so that's a bit distracting. But the positive part is that students or people get used to these simulations. So if you're used to it, these irrelevant aspects can get less. But still a challenge. And also very difficult to define and specify a psychometric model to analyze the data that you gather from simulation-based assessments. There are some models. I can give you the models, but not now because we don't have that much time. But it's quite a challenge. Yeah, it's really a big challenge. Next slide, please. Okay, so I would quickly go over an example of a simulation-based assessment, and it's really an interesting one. It's a bit outdated, but still, the way how they do it, I think, is really inspiring. So this simulation-based assessment is called GDoc, and this is a computer-based doctor simulator, but we can easily transfer this to VR also. The purpose of this GDoc application assessment thingy is to familiarize junior doctors with the day-to-day stress of a hectic hospital. And they are simulating patients and recreating scenarios provided by senior doctors. So it's really cool that GDoc supplies these junior doctors with valuable virtual experience, because otherwise this experience is really hard to obtain due to many constraints such as cost and time. What is really interesting is that they all capture the data of the actions that the student is doing and then review it in a text document afterwards with a senior doctor. So there is maybe some room for improvement, but it can inspire you and think to the future what we could do with that in VR. So if you look at the image behind me, I will quickly explain how they work. This little man over here represents the student going into the hospital. So in this assessment, the student is asked some questions from the patients, from doctors who are all simulated. And if the student answers the questions correctly, they will directly go to the next task. But if they don't answer it correctly, they will get a scaffold. So they get another question, kind of like a hint or a question that is asked in a different way to give them another chance. Of course, this is noted in the assessment document that they didn't directly knew the right answer. And if they answer that correctly, they will go to the next task. But if they don't, they will get another scenario, and over here you can see a helpful nurse appears and helps them out. And then they will go to the next task. This is all documented in a text document. So it will be reviewed later with the student and the senior doctor. But the interesting thing is here that the student can't get stuck. Because what would be more annoying than doing an assessment in VR and getting stuck at the first task and not being able to continue. So it's really cool to think about how we can solve this problem. And this is a way to do it. Yeah, so I was really inspired by this example and I really wanted to share it with you guys. So I hope you have learned something new from it. And I would really like to see my next slide now. Okay, my research. I will go over my design briefly, so you guys have an idea what I'm doing. I'm still busy with the designing stage of my assessment, but I already have a plan how I will approach this problem. So my company, Serious VR, is designing a training, and during this training, I will be developing the VR assessment. This VR training and assessment really have some overlap with each other, so it's great to do at the same time to be as efficient as possible. So that's what you see right here. And in the end, we will have a VR assessment of that. Next slide.
Evelien, sorry to disturb you. Can we just have a quick check? There's been a report that not everyone could see the slides. Can we just have some emojis if the slides are moving and if you can currently see a slide that says My Research? Can you give us some emojis? Okay, can I suggest if you can't see the slides moving that you re-enter the room, because it would be your system that's stopping you from seeing the slides. So if you just leave the room and come back in. Yeah, okay, let's continue.
Thanks, no problem. Good that you mentioned it, guys. Okay, cool. So when we have the VR assessment, and you're probably wondering, okay, you magically come up with a VR assessment. No, of course not. There's a whole framework behind it. I'm trying to design a framework for making an assessment in VR. It's, by the way, simulation-based assessment, as you probably would have guessed, because I've talked a lot about it. I will use expert knowledge, so trainers who are familiar with the training in real life, to transfer it into a training in VR, and then try to make an assessment about it in VR. So I will work closely together with these experts because they can tell me what the learning goals are, how to assess the certain behaviors that the trainees will show us. So I really use the expert knowledge to design an assessment. So when we have the final assessment, and I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it, we can gather data. So I will let trainees do the instruction first, so they know how the procedure works. By the way, I forgot to tell, but it's a training about a technical procedure. They have to put something together in a machine. It's really technical, but not really difficult. So they will first get an instruction on how to do the procedure. Then they will be able to train that for a certain amount of times, and then I will give them the assessments. Yes. So in the assessments, I have determined with the experts what data to gather and what data we will collect. And if we collect the data, the plan is to make an algorithm which scores the data by itself. So the computer will score the data. Also, the experts will score the same data. And then the point is to see if my algorithm is as good in scoring these people as the real-life experts are. If there's a high correlation between these two, I will have validated my algorithm. I know it's very ambitious, but I will try. And I will see if it's possible to make an algorithm for procedural training and see if we can assess people through that instead of using a trainer or an expert. Because somebody mentioned in the audience that it really depended on the teacher how you are assessed. It's really subjective. And there are pros and cons to that. But if you use an algorithm, it won't be subjective anymore. So there's that. We can tackle that problem. I know it's a bit dry, but it's for a procedure, of course. And it's not for your kids in the classroom. So that's really procedural knowledge. So this will be my research next to all the information I gathered on general use of assessment in VR. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, we're almost done. Almost time for questions. So to summarize, it's still very early days for VR assessment. There's really not a lot of information and research been done about this topic. It's really new. It's really hard to get well informed about this. If you guys have any knowledge about this or know people who are busy with the same topic, please let me know, because I think working together on this is really a great thing. We can for sure help each other out. And there's a lot of potential for using data when we use VR or computers to assess. So that's really interesting. Don't forget to validate your assessments. If you are using a computer or not, it's always important to really validate your assessment and know for sure that you're measuring the correct thing. Even if that's creativity or if that's speed, it doesn't matter. You really should know what you measure. And to end it with, more research is needed about assessment in general, but especially about assessment in VR, because there isn't much. And I hope to really add something to it and help some of you out. Yeah. So next slide. I really hope you have learned something, and I'm open to questions. You can add me on LinkedIn or email me. Find me on Education in VR Discord. I'm here to work together with you or answer questions, and I would love to hear your opinion. So the floor is open for you to raise your hand and ask some questions.
Guys, can we please show some appreciation, first of all, for Evelien for that superb presentation on her work on assessment in VR. Thank you, Evelien.
Thanks,
we
guys.
are going to open the floor for a few minutes if you have some burning questions, but I'd also like to let participants know that in a few minutes we can go to the social space together, where you can speak directly to Evelien as well. So if you have some questions now, you can raise your hand, and Evelien will be able to answer them. Do we have any additional questions? Okay, we have one from Heather. Heather, you have the microphone now.
Hi, Evelien. I'd like to tell you, you get a 10 out of 10 for your slides today. Good job.
Aww.
There's a little assessment joke for you, right? Right at the beginning. You did well with your slides. Seriously, you did, right? You didn't give us too much white space and blind us in the audience, so that was great.
I hope I didn't. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I do have a serious question, though, and that is related to your topic and how it intersects with time. And I'm presenting on a research topic in a few hours, and I'm sitting here kind of getting ready for it and rereading some of my sources and everything. And the one thing that I'm trying to nail down is I have a pretty good understanding of the novelty effect. So when students are first interacting with something, that's going to generally cause all of their scores to go up. We know that in instructional design. We know that causes that to happen. The first time they use a pen from a pencil, they like the pen better. Of course they do, right? The first time they use markers from crayons, they like the markers better. Happens every time you sort of level up a little bit. But have you found anything in your research that talks about the impact of time and these assessments in terms of like maybe students that took one assessment in VR and then a year later took it again in VR? Anything like that shows the effect of time? Like, so said another way, the novelty would worn off after a year. That's what I'm asking. Have you found anything like that?
Yes, yeah, for sure. There aren't much studies about students doing an assessment now and checking them later in the year with the same VR assessment. But I have found proof of students getting used to these VR assessments or computer-based simulations. So indeed, you're totally right. The first time you put on these VR goggles, it will be amazing. Students will be very motivated, very excited because they are in a different world, you know. So you will definitely measure different things then from when you measure after a certain amount of time, they will get used to it. And you will definitely measure other effects then. Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
This is nice research. If somebody is interested in doing that research, please let me know.
Heather, thanks for your question. We have a question also from Raven. Raven, you should now have the microphone.
Hi, thanks.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Where are you? Can you give me some emoticons so I know where to look? Oh, there. Yeah. Hi.
I'm in the balcony.
I see.
Hi. Hi. I'm thinking back to one of your early slides when you were just laying the foundation for assessment and talking about who's the assessor and why are we assessing and what are we assessing and validation. Mm-hmm. And I'm also thinking about the person who spoke about being a veteran teacher and high stakes testing. And it occurred to me that when you posted or when you put that slide up, that with high stakes testing as we know them, particularly in the United States right now, is that information about what are we assessing, why are we assessing, who's the assessor, what's being done with this information is not shared with teachers or with students. And so the reaction that people have to these high stakes tests, I think, come from a lot of the lack of transparency about them and the way that they kind of placed on teachers and students, and then no feedback ever circles back to those constituents. And so I'm thinking about virtual reality and things like social media, right, that are assessing us every day and pulling data from us and using it for whatever end, and we don't know. So I'm thinking about ethics in virtual reality assessment, and if we're monitoring where people's eyes look and where they turn their heads and what they're doing, I'm wondering if there's a way for assessment in virtual reality to take the lead in more ethical, more transparent methodologies of assessment so we can break some of these cycles.
That would be amazing, right? Well, it's too bad to hear that you have no clue sometimes on these three very essential questions, and not only the teachers, but the students should also know what the goal is of their course. If you don't know what the learning goal is, then where should you focus on, and how could you reflect back on that? So that's really troubling, and we really should all work towards making it more clear for everybody, I think. Yeah, and VR is maybe one way to do that, but in general, we should, I think, yeah. Thank you. Great question.
That's a good point. Okay, guys, so unfortunately, we've come to the end of the time for this session. There is another speaker going to be coming into here next. I think it's to do with VR and vaping. But if you'd like to follow Evelien into the social space, she'll be able to speak to you and answer all of your questions directly. And there's no limit on the time there. So Evelien, if you want to take your audience through the social space, but let's please give her one more sign of appreciation for this wonderful speaker. Thanks very much, Evelien.
Thank you, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. This was my learning goal for you.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. So if you'd like to lead the way and take people to the portal, that'd be great.
Okay, go ahead, follow me.
Thank you. And don't forget to turn your megaphone off as you're going out, please, Evelien.
Oh, you don't want to hear me? Okay, over here, all the way in the back. So you can all go into the portal, and I will follow you in a while. And to answer your questions or to just chat, hang out. It's in the back of the venue, outside. Yes.
I control myself very
Okay, see you there.
So I have no.
I know, right? I'm in TD too.
It's awful, isn't it? I'm
I
going to
know,
go
right?
put my headset
So
on in a
weird.
minute. I think I'm going to put my headset on. right now. Actually, I'm gonna jump out and put my headset on. So I'll catch you in the social space in a few minutes. Hi, Linda. I'm just gonna jump out at 2D and everyone's still blocked. That was a mistake of mine. I didn't unmute everybody. You can speak now, Linda. Sorry, I forgot to unmute everybody. I'm just going to jump out and
I'm
put my
back
headset
in an
on.
hour.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
taking my headset off